In this video, I'm going to briefly explain 5 concepts or dimensions of online persona that helps to explain, analyze, and examine the conditions under which the production of a digital self has become ubiquitous and public. These dimensions, publicness, mediatization, performativity, collectivity, and value, are not exhaustive as there are many others, but they are useful for exploring the relations between humans and networks and explaining what personas are and what they might be. You can find more information on these dimensions in the article by Kim Barber, Kacha Lee, and myself in the Persona Studies Journal, which is open access. The first dimension of contemporary online persona is publicness. In the early days of the internet, the default online identity was anonymous. The eradication of anonymity has been a gradual process, as your presence online has been increasingly tied to mobile phones, credit cards, and of course, browser-based surveillance. There are, however, some places where we can create online personas that use pseudonyms like player tags and alternative identities. Even Facebook allows for some degree of this. But these personas still have a public audience. Publicness is a broad category of openness. At one end, you can think of the public sphere, which is a conceptual space in which we discuss ideas and issues. Then there is the public domain. This is a legal space which is created by the expiration of copyright. For example, F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby and Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway both enter the public domain this year, which means that they're no longer protected by copyright laws, meaning that anyone can copy and use the texts. Then there are physical public spaces, such as the park, and semi-publics, like the supermarket and the classroom. Anything that you share with anyone else makes it public, even if that is just one person. We are now living in an age where what we call private information, such as your medical records, your banking records, your school records, can all be accessed by a range of human and non-human actors, making them semi-public, which means they can also easily become fully public and open, usually maliciously through the process that we call doxing. Following the spread of social networks, we have all become familiar with the experience of what is called a micropublic. A micropublic is the result of a social network of connection. Your friends, your family, your followers on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and so on are all part of different micropublics. Each persona is at the center of their own micropublic or range of micropublics. You will have many different personas and many different micropublics, and some of these may overlap. You are also part of each other's micropublics as a follower, a subscriber, or someone who uses a hashtag, or even just being part of an online chat. If you use a hashtag on an image on Instagram, you become part of the micropublic collective associated with that hashtag. This is what makes social media influencers successful. They are reliant on your participation in their micropublics, which is why we call influencers micro-celebrities. Do remember that the term micro here is not meant to indicate the size of the audience, but rather the absence of the macro infrastructure of previous forms of media. There are many micro-celebrities with millions of followers. The implication of the publicness of persona is the second dimension, which is mediatization. This refers to the way our lives and cultures have been transformed by digital technologies that mediate our way of seeing and presenting ourselves. For example, when we take a selfie that we post to a social media platform, we are mediatizing the presentation of ourself. We also view the mediatization of presentation of others through the same screen. This is not a new phenomenon. What is new, however, is the degree to which our propensity for mediatization enables others to collect data about us. Also, mediatization leads to the creation of millions of digital objects during our lifetime, many of which we will never see or know exist. Files, browser cookies, traces, emails, comments, posts, likes. Everything that you do online is a mediatization of your persona. Even every time your phone connects to a network as you move about, every time you pay for something with anything other than cash, our everyday actions create digital objects that mediatize you and your behavior. These digital objects accrue like detritus. They are paratexts that indexically point to not only who you are, but your persona. Remember that the persona is not the individual or the collective, but rather the negotiation between the two. And the collective is made up of human and non-human actors. The once unique and discrete legacy media landscape has transformed into a computer-controlled and digitally communicated mesh of mediatization, largely dominated by massive corporations that typically escape traditional methods of regulation. The degree of mediatization has long-lasting symbolic and practical consequences for how we live our lives and perform our everyday public selves, which brings us to the third dimension of persona, its performativity, which I have discussed in previous videos. So to describe something as performative does not mean it is either fake or authentic. There are many fictional characters that are not real but feel authentic, and there are many real politicians who feel fake. The public performance of the self is neither entirely real nor entirely fictional. As I've mentioned previously, the work of sociologist Irving Goffman and his dramaturgical model helps us to understand how we present our persona differently between various front stages and back stages. Another important contributor to the notion of performativity is the work of philosopher Judith Butler, who helped us to understand the way core elements of our public selves, such as the presentation of our gender, are constructed for us and by us. Butler contested the idea that there is a natural or real presentational quality of gendered identity. She says this gendered identity is neither biologically determined nor individually produced, but rather both enabled and concentrated by the institutions, technologies, networks, representations, and cultures in which the public self is assembled and performed. So this is a good place to point out the fundamental shift from the representational media paradigm, and we'll come back to this discussion in a later video. We are seeing a movement away from the legacy media paradigm, which stood to represent us. Public figures like politicians, celebrities, religious leaders, and public icons represented us in this model. They stood in for us in the public sphere through their performance communicated to us in legacy media formats like print, radio, television, and film. This regime still exists, but it is competing with and overlapped by the new presentational media paradigm, which is enabled by ubiquitous mediatization. The thing to remember about presentational media is that while you have agency over how you present yourself, it can be picked up by the collective, whether it's your family, your audience, or an algorithm. And any mediatization of your persona can move intercommunicatively across multiple media platforms, services, modes, formats, and types of interactions. Again, I've talked about intercommunication in other videos, but it's central to the collective dimension of persona. The collective dimension of persona is one that works to produce, seek out, negotiate, and move between connections, resulting in a complex collective of networked relations. Micropublics are a good example of this because we see a shift in the cultural and creative industries around new types of media and new levels of audience engagement. It is the collective dimension of persona that makes social media influencers, Twitch streamers, and of course YouTubers possible as a career. We also see the rise of crowdfunding and platforms like Patreon because of the direct connection between the content creator and the collective audience, becoming co-consumers, co-producers, and collaborators in the production of content. Which brings us to the fifth dimension, value. Personas have many different types of value. There is the value over the agency, right? The decisions that you get to make about your persona performance and how you interact and engage with your micropublics and the micropublics that you're a part of. Agency is a crucial component of the value dimension because it is about the choices that you get to make about the way that your online persona is at least presented. Then there is the value associated with this that comes with the prestige, the amount of public awareness that comes with your persona, and this creates your public reputation. And then we've also already mentioned that personas have direct economic value. And not only to yourself, but en masse, they become incredibly valuable intellectual property for advertising platforms like Facebook and Google. They help train artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms, and of course have a broader value as a new type of cultural industry. We'll pick up on this discussion and implications for these dimensions in later videos and in class. But first, I guess I want to kind of leave you with a question. What are the other dimensions of persona? What haven't I included in this model? What should we consider to be a major element of persona that this hasn't yet addressed? Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you in the next video.